Have you ever asked yourself these questions? Why are we here on earth? What's the purpose of all of this? Why do bad things happen to us? I can't begin to answer those questions or to even venture an answer for some of them. What I do know is that we're here on this earth to have a human experience, and it comes in seasons, and there is a purpose. We're going to discuss that today. Welcome to Drawing the Spirit, where art therapy meets your soul. I'm Annice, your host, and I'll be guiding you through this journey on the purpose of seasons today. We like to start off our session with some grounding exercises, which are simply deep breathing and setting our intentions. The reason that we do this is because the deep breathing relaxes us, it calms our minds, and enables us to hear and feel the Spirit while we are learning today. So let's start off with a few deep breaths. We're going to take air in through your nose slowly out through the mouth. Okay, continue to breathe slowly. And think about what you learned in the How and Why episode of Purpose. And let's connect what we're going to learn today with the seasons, the purpose of seasons. Think about what you might want to learn, what understanding you might want to gain, and what knowledge you might want to have to connect to that, and if there's any healing of anything that came up from the last episode as well. Let's do one more deep breath. Air in through the nose and slowly out. Good. We're ready to begin. This is part 2 of the topic of purpose. We had discussed the how and the why last time, and we're just going to connect that information to the seasons. And I'm going to start off with a little story about an ancient tribe that was very peaceful. In fact, they were so peaceful, they did not have any trained warriors, any weapons of any kind for war or even for their own self-defense. It seems that they would have been a very easy target, or so it seemed to a group of warriors who came into their village one day. And the warriors were there to take what they could and destroy the village and to kill the people. But the people welcomed them in the village and said they were willing to share whatever they had. Well, this was a little confusing to the chief, and he didn't quite know what to do. So he threatened the villagers and said that he would allow them to live if they could give him the answer to a riddle he was going to tell them. So that's what he did. He gathered the elders of the village and the wise ones of the village, and he told them that he wanted them to answer this question: what will make me happy when I'm sad and sad when I'm happy? And he gave them till the next morning to come up with an answer to that riddle. Well, the elders and the wise members of the village were up all night. They discussed it, they prayed, and they worked in secret until the morning. And the chief called them to him and asked them to give their answer. Well, they presented him with a simple gold ring. Well, he got so angry because he said he had far greater possessions than a simple gold ring, and it didn't answer the question, and solve the riddle. So he was about to throw it into the fire when the elders pointed to the ring and said, there's an inscription inside. So what will make you happy when you're sad and sad when you're happy? The words in the ring said, this too shall pass. Well, the chief knew he had been defeated, and he silently walked away from the village with his warriors, and he took the ring with him. So what saved the villagers? Well, it was divine intervention. They were peaceful, and that was their purpose, was to remain peaceful, no matter what it might cost them. This story reminds me of Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. It has given me hope and encouragement during difficult times. It assures me that things will work out all right in time, because God is in control of everything. He's in control of our problems, our fears, our insecurities, our failures, our inabilities, and yes, even our successes. He's always working to make life more joyful, meaningful, purposeful, and worthwhile. And while the preceding story was not true to the best of my knowledge, and you may have heard a version of it before, it's still a reminder that God is in control and can solve any problem. Also, that life is lived in seasons, and the phrase, "this too shall pass," is appropriate for that. The third verse in Ecclesiastes talks about time and purpose as seasons like the passing of the seasons we go through every year. And the time is referring to earthly measures, which is important to remember. What comes after the third verse are sets or 14 opposites, life events, if you want to call it that list some of life's deepest events and difficulties and things that we will go through in our experience in our lives. And while I was writing this episode, I felt that some of it was like a little depressing when you think about it. And my goal is to inspire and uplift people. So I prayed to God to help me to see this book in another way, or what could I add to it to get the message that I was looking for and the answers I was looking for. And the answer came from the Bible dictionary. It suggested that this book be read in the light of certain key phrases, such as the one in Ecclesiastes 1:9 that refers to the words "under the sun," which means from a worldly point of view, or how things appear to people on earth. From this point of view, everything is seen as temporary and will soon be gone. And I know I still haven't gotten to the uplifting part yet. I needed a broader scope of knowledge, and sometimes when we're studying the scriptures and we're looking for answers and messages, we just have to dig deeper and go further. So I read some other books, Hebrews and other chapters in Ecclesiastes, and it wasn't until I got to Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and 12 that the most spiritual part of the entire book appeared. And it concludes that the only lasting, permanent acts come from obedience to God's commandments, because all things will be examined by Him on the day of judgment. In other words, our life on this earth is temporary, will pass, and then we will be judged by God on the day of judgment. Our life on this earth will be measured by how well we followed God's commandments and were obedient to Him. And it sounds pretty easy to just follow 10 little old commandments and be obedient to God. But I know it's not that easy. As a teacher, everything I taught my students from levels kindergarten on up to adult education always ended with a test on what they had learned to see how well they had learned it. So some students were able to learn the lessons right away and pass their test. Others needed more help, additional instructions, more practice. And some of my special education students required different teaching methods altogether. Some learners were visual and needed to see the material with their eyes. Others were verbal learners, audible learners, tactile learners. So there's just all different ways of learning and accessing information. So I had to keep these different learning styles in mind with those students so that they could access the information. And so God does that too when He's trying to teach us something. He knows how we learn and what's going to help us to learn and understand something. So He's going to teach us something different than someone else. And teaching sounds pretty easy until you take into consideration all those variables and difficulties that people have of learning, and not just learning it, but putting the information into practice. That's what the tests are for, to see how well you understand something and can you actually use it. That's what the purpose of learning is for, is to be able to use what you've learned. And our spiritual lessons in our lives are like that too. knowing the Ten Commandments and following them in different circumstances is not the same. That the commandments or those spiritual lessons seem pretty easy until you start living life and dealing with all of the difficulties that you encounter with it. We can go through some hard events in lives that will truly test us as to our understanding of these lessons. I recall when I was 19 years old, a long time ago, and I was out on my own for the very first time, and I was trying to be so independent because, well, I was grown up and I was mature, so I should be able to handle everything myself. I was having difficult financial problems of supporting myself and going to college at the same time. And one afternoon I was walking home from the grocery store with my little bag of groceries. And the reason I was walking was because my car needed repairs and I couldn't afford to fix it. And I wasn't going to call my parents and ask for help because, well, I was an adult now. I should be able to handle it myself. So as I was walking past the downtown area, there was a man closing up his shop. And he had an armful of papers and envelopes and things. And he dropped one of the envelopes on the sidewalk. And he walked away, not realizing that he had dropped something. Well, I walked over and I picked up the envelope. And money fell out of it. There was lots of money in that envelope. And I thought about my car that needed repairs, and I looked down at that little bag of groceries that may not last me for the week. But my mother had taken me to church since I was a baby, and I certainly knew my commandments, and I knew right from wrong. And I knew that it would have been stealing had I kept that man's money. I knew that, and I wasn't going to do it. So I called him and I handed him the envelope, and he was absolutely stunned because he knew that there were many people who would not have done that. They would have kept the money because they would have tried to justify it in their mind somehow that, well, he dropped it, so now it was theirs, finders keepers type thing, or that no one would know, no one saw it, so it would be okay. And so people can justify all kinds of things in their mind, but they know. If you're taking something that doesn't belong to you, it's stealing and it's coveting, and you're not loving your neighbor. I mean, there's all kinds of commandments that would have been broken. But the thing that I realized and what I felt good when I walked away was that I knew I had done the right thing. There have been many times in my life I hadn't done the right thing. But, we can ask for forgiveness and repent and be forgiven for the things that we do. But what happened was I had passed that test. And that passed in my life. Those financial difficulties passed. My dad helped me to get a different car that actually ran. And I got a job as a waitress. At that time, when you worked in a restaurant, they gave you a free meal with every shift you worked. So that helped with my grocery bill. And God continued to meet my needs, and I was able to graduate college, and my seasons got better. And so the difficulties passed, just like in the story, and just like the seasons. But had I broken that commandment and stole that money, I would have to have lived with that shame forever. Even though I would have been forgiven and could have repented, it still would have been in my memory that I had done that. And so remembering that this too shall pass can give us the courage to follow God's commandments and make decisions that we will live with for a lifetime or eternity. And I don't want to make anybody feel bad if you've done some things, because we all make mistakes and do things. But just remember, we can all ask for forgiveness and repent and do better. And that's what matters, is that we continue to grow and to be better. Because our lives, like the seasons, will change, and we will have challenges and times of joy. And during our challenges, we can be comforted in the knowledge that, yes, these things will pass. And we shouldn't be sad when we are having a wonderful time or wonderful season where there's lots of joy and happy things happening, because we know that that won't last either. But it can help us to appreciate those good times and the people that we share them with. And we can compare Earth's seasons to the seasons in our spiritual life. We know that we get seasons because the Earth revolves around the sun. And we know that wherever you are in position on Earth, the closer you are to the sun, you're going to have warmer weather, like summer and spring, because that is the source of the light. And when we think about our different spiritual seasons, we know that we are affected by our position or nearness to the source of our spiritual light, which is God. So we want to stay close to Him. And let's look at the scriptures a little bit more, and they'll tell us more about it. The words in that verse 3 says, under the heaven, which God is making it clear that He is talking about the earthly realm. And a human experience is an important term to take note of here also. We usually think about our human or our earthly experience every day. We get up in the morning and we start thinking about all the things we're going to do that day. We think about the problems we have to solve. We think about our plans. In Proverbs 19:21, it says, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. So we can make a lot of plans, but we may not have control over all of those things. And after the third verse, there are 14 pairs of seasons or opposites, life events. You can call them a lot of different things. And in the scriptures, it mentions these opposites. And these are all things that we have no control over. And we shouldn't feel helpless about it, because God has control over it, and He has our best interest at heart. So the first one is to be born and to die. We certainly have no control over that. It's the beginning and the end of our physical life. To plant and to pluck. And they're usually using farming metaphors to describe the seasons of growth and harvest in which we mature and which we reap what we have worked for. The next set is to kill and to heal, highlighting the duality of destruction and restoration. It just happens. Naturally in life, those things happen. The next set, to break down and to build up, the construction and deconstruction of our lives. When we're younger, we spend all this time constructing our lives, and it seems like when we're older, we just start deconstructing or downsizing, in other words. Weeping and laughing, the emotional part of the human experience, and it reacts to the sad and happy events, of which we're always going to have both of those things. Mourning and dancing, periods of deep grief and celebration. Again, opposites, and we're always going to have both of those too. Casting away stones and gathering stones, which is just talking about clearing a field for farming or preparing, basically preparation for our future and when we are at the end of our lives as well. Embracing and refraining refers to the connections that we have. Number 9 is the time of getting and time to lose or to give up things. Receiving and knowing when to let go. And discernment about choices or of receiving blessings and letting things go when we need to. The next set, keeping and to cast away, is discerning what is of value and what we need to discard. That could be habits that we have or activities we shouldn't be involved in, any of those kinds of things. The next one, a time to rend and a time to sow. It's the ancient custom of tearing your clothes in grief, and then the period of restoration, because there's always restoration. We can grieve for a while, but then our life needs to continue on. The next one, silence and speaking, is having the wisdom to know when to listen and when to use one's voice. Love and hate. the moral and emotional capacity for attraction and righteous opposition. And the last one, war and peace. We've always had that. We've always had that in our history. It's the human experience of conflict and harmony. So the phrase, "this too shall pass," in the story applies to those things we just talked about. The verses talk about good and bad things that do pass, and it's also the purpose of our human experience to experience all of those things. Because to have one and not the other is, you need that contrast in order to appreciate the good things when you have the bad things. And we also learn from the things, and I don't like to use the word bad, because even something that's not pleasant or is painful and hurtful is still useful in some way. We learn from it. We appreciate the good things in our life and the good people in our life. So we can find a way to use those experiences as well. In Ecclesiastes 3:11, it says, despite all of life's changes that we talked about, those opposites, God makes everything beautiful in time, in His time. And this offers practical wisdom. It encourages patience, acceptance of our circumstances, and trust in His divine plan. So, what are the things that we do control? We just mentioned all the things that we don't have control over. So what do we control? Well, let's take the example of the first verse. To be born and to die. We don't control that. But we do control all the things in between that. After we're born and we're old enough to make those decisions, we control what our lives will be. And what we decide happens or makes our decision as to what happens when we die in our afterlife. The way we live our lives, the choices we have made, determine our afterlife. Now, Jesus took care of that for us when He died on the cross. He died for our sins so that we can go to heaven and we can be with our families again and live our lives in joy. So we can choose whether we accept Him and follow Him or not. That's our decision. That's that choice in between when we are born and when we die. So God sees the way we live our lives. And this is how we're going to be judged or tested. He sees how we live and who we truly are and who we become in this life. He sees the goodness. He sees the love in our hearts. He knows if we're genuine or are we just after a photo op to make it look like we're a good person. And you see a lot of that on social media and in the news. You know, you wonder. But are we really helping people because when we help people, we're helping Jesus as well, because He loves us all. He died for all of us. And so we are to love one another. It's one of the commandments. So we are to help each other. And we are to be honest and obedient and sincere. And God knows if we keep the commandments and other covenants that we made with Him. He knows our hearts, our thoughts. He sees actions that others do not. He hears those conversations behind closed doors. And He sees things that no one else sees. He hears the gossip that comes from lips. He knows the evil wishes and thoughts of jealous people or selfish minds. He sees the apathy towards others who are suffering and people don't help them. They just walk on by. He sees when you turn your back on those that He put into your life for you to care for and help. And He does that. He puts people in our lives for us to help. He sees the fake smiles. He sees beyond the cover-ups, the masks, the intentions, the real intentions that we have. He hears the judgments that we make on each other, the harsh words. He feels that lack of love and concern for those who don't seem to have value because they don't have money and possessions and fame. He knows it all, and you can't fool Him. Without real growth, the kind that makes a difference in our hearts and minds and is reflected in our thoughts, actions, and speech, we're not going to fulfill the purpose that we are here for, which is to learn and to be better people. In the 14 events or life experiences that we looked at, you can see them as events of life or opposites, but I can also see them as turning points where choices can be made. I recently read a passage that said you're only one bad decision away from becoming a completely different human being. And I thought, one decision? What would that one decision be? It could be anything. But then I thought, let's flip that around. You are only one good decision away from becoming a completely different human being. What would that one decision be for you to change your life for the better? Probably change it forever. Mine was following God and the teachings of Jesus Christ. It turned my life completely around, and while my life is certainly not perfect, and it's not easy, Satan doesn't like to lose by any means, and it seems he fights me on everything, and he makes life hard, but God fights my battles and restores anything that may have been lost. When I chose to walk a different path, and a spiritual path, I lost friends that didn't appreciate me or my decisions or even understand why I was making the decision that I did. I had decided that I needed to clean up my act, and so one of the things I did was to not drink alcohol anymore. And I didn't speak against people who did. That was their choice, so I didn't say anything. But people still didn't understand, and I didn't fit in with my friends or in the old places that I was going to, and people weren't comfortable with me anymore who did continue to drink, even though I didn't say anything against them. And I don't mean to sound mean, but I found that when I stopped drinking, those old friends were not that interesting, and their jokes weren't that funny, really. So it showed me how I had been influenced in so many different ways through that one act of a habit that I had. So I had to move forward and make new friends that shared my values and beliefs. And when we make decisions like that, you have to move out of those environments, whether you like it or not. You will not fit anymore. And so I needed to be with people who were going to support me and the decisions in my life and my effort to be a better person and to follow God. And when I decided to follow God, I learned that He and the Holy Spirit cannot reside in unclean places. So that's why I needed to clean up my body, my vessel, for the Holy Spirit to be there. And I've not had one regret in all the years in that decision. Not one. Like I said, it's not easy, but it's definitely worth what you have to go through, the changes that you need to make. And my happiness and joy increased, and I found that you don't have to drink and have, alcohol in your life and all of those things to enjoy your life and have fun. I mean, and a hangover is not fun anyway, as I recall. So I'm grateful for God's love and saving grace. No matter what difficulty or problem I'm faced with, it doesn't defeat me because I know I am not alone. My faith and my comfort from the Lord is constantly with me. I'm given gifts and guidance to help me and angels to protect me. And what's better than that? As it says in Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. So even though those have come against me have found that God doesn't allow harm to come to His beloved children, that is a comfort to me. Best of all, I know that when this life is over, I'm going to be in a beautiful eternal home with God and my family. And I just want to say, I'm not judging people for what they do. I understand because I've been there, and I know how difficult it is to make decisions like some of us have had to make. And I'm just fulfilling my purpose and my calling and what God has asked me to do. And this is my purpose, to teach others. I teach love and compassion and faith and other spiritual values and teachings. I share my testimony, my life experiences, good and bad, the lessons I've learned, the heartaches and betrayals I've gone through, and the miracles I've seen and experienced. And I am just getting started with all of the things that I will be sharing with you in this podcast. I share the pain I've healed from and the seemingly never-ending spiritual battles against Satan and his followers. It's not easy to open up and share my personal life. I've always been a very private person, and so this is not an easy thing that I have agreed to do. But God wanted me to come forth at this time and share my life experiences and to share his message. And his message is love, basically. He loves us all. He wants us all with him. And my goal is for people who listen to my voice hear his words, and you can flip that around too. For people who hear my words, they hear his voice. It works both ways. And I'm not pointing my finger at anyone and saying, shame on you, you shouldn't do this. I don't do that because, again, I understand what it's like. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to show you and tell you what I've done and hopefully be an example and an inspiration to other people and let you know that it is possible to do the impossible with God's help. I've had people tell me, oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. And I tell them, well, I'm glad that I did it before you told me that because I didn't know. There's nothing impossible with God. He does what he wants, and he can help you to do things as well. And so I've had glimpses into God's eternal perspective that have given me a greater understanding of my earthly life and the bridge to the next life. And I strive to continue to learn and to grow each and every day because that's what it takes to stay connected and aligned with God and his will. And this is my purpose in my season of life. I asked God why he waited so long until I was so old to ask me to do this assignment. In the next video, I will give you that answer. The next episode will be about purpose and how it changes with life. And this isn't just for old people, it's for people of all ages. And then after the third episode, there'll be an art therapy activity for all three of the parts of the episode. So join me and become the masterpiece you were meant to be. Stay awesome.